if it's a bad configuration, nothing will work. So it's better than for some stuff to work with the wrong data. I think that's the reason in security. Stuff should break before a data compromise could happen.
Welcome to the DevSec for Scale podcast, the show that makes security a first-class citizen for growing companies. My name is Jeremy Hest, Head of Developer Relations at Achilles, the secrets management SaaS platform. This interview podcast brings security experts and practitioners together to offer practical and actionable ways for small and growing companies to implement security best practices using shift-left principles without interrupting developer life cycles. Welcome back, everyone, to the DevSec for Scale podcast. My name is Jeremy Hess from Achilles, and with me today is a great guest. His name is Yoav Turgeman Levi, and he's a senior DevOps at a company called Harmonya, a really cool startup. We'll get into a little bit more details about that. Yoav, thanks for joining me. And before we talk about you and the background and the company, let's get right to it. Tell me, why do you think developer access is so hard to secure?
Well, hi, Jeremy, and thanks you for having me. Great meeting you again. It's been a long time. So let's talk about developer access and why it's so hard to secure. So I've been moving around, and we'll talk about it later. And I've seen many flavors of developers. And one of the things that's common about developers is everyone wants the highest permission all the time. Everyone wants to be an admin because they don't want any restriction on them. So everyone wants to get the asterisk permissions, like I can do anything on every kind of resource that I want to do. Because if not, they are like, they can't work as they want. They stuck into a barrier and then they sit. Developers love to be either sitting and waiting and like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have any permission, so I have to wait. So there is kind of a fine line that you need to walk all the time and to see how far can I give them privilege to do these kind of actions without any actual giving them their full control, so they can also wreck stuff without knowing, without even knowing what to do. I think most of the tension between DevOps and developers is like, oh, developer X, why did you done this stuff? Oh, DevOps Y, please fix the problems that I did. If we haven't had the permissions from the get-go, then we wouldn't be in this kind of situation now. So I think there's always kind of this tension between the DevOps and the developers, how far or how long of a rope I can give them to work with on the system.
Right.
So that's one part. And the second part is not all developers are really good at securing. I can give one developer admin, but as you all know, we all prone to social engineering, and lots of developers fall for phishing attempts or for just leaving their computer open and someone taking it. Lots of stuff that can happen to developers. So not only that you're supposed to give them the least amount of privilege, you're supposed to also kind of keeping it from them. So in case it got compromised or they leave the keys to someone else, they use the same password also in their own computer, in their personal computer, and someone hacks their personal computer, you should secure that as much as you can. So there's like a really tricky part of trying to keep the access as contained as possible.
Yeah, so definitely from both ends, you have to figure out what's the best, the best way to figure out, the balance for sure. So Yoav, let's talk a little bit about you. Can you give us just a little bit about your background and get a little bit into what Harmonya does?
Sure. So my name is Yoav. I'm in the tech industry for almost like 10 years. Before that, I was in a 8200. And in the last 6 years or 7 years, I think I'm a DevOps full-time. Been through large companies like NICE and Iron Source, in the medium companies like Wiser and Logs.io, and in small startups, Converge that got sold, and now Harmonya. So I've been around a pretty long year and seen all kind of different of cycles. So right now I'm working in a cool startup named Harmonya. And what this startup do is a startup that is doing data enrichment for retail companies. So big companies like give us their item catalog, and we enrich them and tell new stories about these products. Also, we're working on the retailer side, like that also give us product data, and we enrich it and give it some more information for companies to use. So instead of buying like cereals or stuff like that, you can search for breakfast cereal or for search for food that helps you bring your immune system. It was a really big deal in the coronavirus. So we help add some more value to the catalog there is for the products. Yes, and it's pretty interesting. It's a very high amount of data and traffic and a big amounts of machine learning models. So
and all very sensitive data, right? That companies don't want to be sharing with just anybody, right?
yeah, so I think one of our biggest problem or our biggest challenges working in Harmonia is securing the data of the customers. Doesn't want to share its selling data with anyone in the world. Not only that, because we're working with, we're using GCP because we don't want even for a slight chance of Amazon and data to mingle. So we're putting as much barriers as we can, as we should, to separate the data of the customer. So none of the customers' data will interfere. We don't want for to know about sales and vice versa. So we're using lots and lots of protections, lots of hard barriers like different projects in Google and different access for each developer. So if you want to work on data, you have to physically log in as a different user. Yeah, because of the sensitivity of data, we have to be really, really strict. Because eventually, and I think it's true for most startups, if you have a data breach, then that's it. End of
So
game.
where does that work from let's say an architectural level when you're building the system and then you have developers obviously logging into different remote machines and all that. So how do you ensure from the lower level that developers are separated in their access and all that?
Yeah, I think that's like our main challenge, and there's several ways for us to enforce it. If you asked before why developer hacks is so hard to secure, let's think about it. A developer wants to work on data, so he has two options: maybe to do SSH and log into a remote server and working like that on the terminal, only with black interface, or download the data for his own local machine, for his own local computer, and open a text editor or open all of the stuff that he can have on his own personal computer and working on from there. But then he wants to move and do some related tasks. So he's download the data to his own computer, and that's it. This developer broke all of our security and has both of the data set on the same computer, which is not like a data breach, but kind of a security risk, security hazard. So we have several enforcement. First of all, we have different environment for each customer. So before multi-tenancy and before sharing any resources, we want to keep each customer on its own project because we're working with Google Cloud. It's called project. So each one of which one of the accounts gets its own project. So data can't be transformed between them. It gets its own network and its own VPC. And on that machines, we're putting VMs and secure them with Cloudflare. So if you want to log in, you have to verify as one of the workers in Harmonia, and we also have this kind of role-based access groups inside to tell which developer can access to which machines because of the task force. So we want only these kind of developers to working only on the features for, and the other data scientists to work only on the features for. Yes, so we're trying to make as much physical barriers as we can, and as much to be as hard as you could to log into these interfaces.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of separating, that's one thing, but what about making sure that everyone has the right access to the right data, right? So not just, authorizing users to use the machines, but the access that they have to data. Let's say they're supposed to work, they can't work on all data. They're given, only access to, certain customer data, and they're not giving access to other customer data. How do you actually ensure complete separation, for developers that really shouldn't be touching any specific data?
Yeah, so I think it's not only for developers, it's also for the services themselves. We're using Google Secret Manager and we're really happy about it. So we have a strict configuration that fails, that stuff will not work. Each one of the data, I will call it the data artifact, has its own versioning and its own tags. And also each service has its own versioning and its own tags. So if one of the client secrets try to reach a configuration and get the data without its proper tag of, then the build fails and the application just won't work. That's the work for us. So we're kind of forcing it on each part of the artifacts and each part of the services through configuration. And we really believe in configuration as an enforcer, because if it's a bad configuration, nothing will work. So it's better than for some stuff to work with the wrong data. I think that's the reason in security. Stuff should break before a data compromise could happen. And yeah, after we have all that, we have also different DNS domains for each one of the customers. And yeah, I think also the separation in Google really helps. So no one can accidentally like, oh, I worked on the wrong machine. No, you're in a different project. You can't work on the same machine. I worked in different companies that has everything have in the same account in AWS. So people get mixed all the time between deploying to staging and deploying to production. One person wants to work on his own dev computer and then he accidentally enters to the prod machine.
We'll get into those at the tips at the end, which I'm sure you'll give us some ideas for developer security. So moving forward, how does your work at larger organizations like Logs.io in the past compare to working in a startup, small company type of world in terms of how the security works on different levels?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting in that's also one part of the reason that they join to a startup company. Sometimes after you work a long time in the industry, you want to do stuff right and in your own way. So joining a startup, you have the opportunity to lead with your own vision about how technical stuff should happen.
Because you are the first DevOps employee
I'm the
at
first DevOps.
Harmonya. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm the first DevOps, so I'm putting all the manuals and all the procedures on how to work and all the stuff like that. I build the infrastructures as the vision that I have seen.
Right.
I think Logs.io was one of the best companies that I worked with, also security-wise. But the thing is, with Logs.io, we had a really difficult process of getting SOC 2 compliance because every company wants compliance. When you start a small startup, you don't really care about security. So you go with the flow, you save your secrets sometimes as plain text on your computer or in your phone, and you don't actually use kind of a secret management, and you put lots of stuff hard-coded and build them like that so you can't access. But when you become a bigger company and you have lots of services, and the scale of Logs.io had, you have so many services that need to talk to each other. So as we said, they need to have special permissions. So like each microservice has to have the specific permission and a specific secret to talk to other services. So only the process of adding a secret manager after you build this gigantic company and work for several years with plain text passwords and stuff like that, bring it all back in is a really pain. It takes for us, it took like 2 people time for over a year to install Vault, which didn't work. So we turned to Achilles, which helped us a lot. And yeah, I think it's like really hard to enforce security stuff after you created a whole complex. So one of the parts, and my reason for talking about security so much, is when the security is started from the ground level, it's so easy for the company to grow with the security in mind, and all the compliance that will be in the future will be easy, since from the beginning you put the guidelines and you put the measures of the security as the company starts. So the company will grow with all the security in place, instead of trying and enforce the security above after this whole tech stack is already complete. So absolutely. Yeah, use security from the beginning as fast as you could.
Great. And just our final question to cap off the episode. I ask all my guests, just give us one or two tips that you have for devs that they could use today that could help them just be more secure in general without taking too much of their cycles.
Yeah, so I think my first tip for everyone is MFA, multi-factor authentication, or put an app on your phone and link everything to it. The amount of phishing attacks, and as long as the world gets more, crazy, and there's more technologies, there are new phishing attacks and new ways to get your data from you. But if you use two-factor authentication, you reduce this risk by 90%. Because when you don't have your phone in your pocket, or if someone tried to get your access, you will get a notification on your phone in advance, and you almost all the time with your phone. So it's not really a risk, and you control every access that you get to each one of your main services. Also for your bank account or for your Gmail account, put MFA on everything that you can. So that's my number one tip, hands down. And the second tip is use secret manager and configuration management. I really believe in configuration, and I believe that hard coding is really hard to, it's really good at the startup level and the beginning, but as long as you grow, you need a central configuration and central place to secret management, and to put it after you created your whole infrastructure is much harder than to put it in the beginning. So I think this is my two tips.
Wonderful. Yep. Great advice. Yoav, it was fantastic to have you. I really appreciate it. And I think that we learned a ton from this episode. So look forward to having you in the future in another episode, and maybe at a future meetup as well. So we look forward to that. And we will be in touch. Have a really great day.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me, and also have a great day.